For details of information about the project, including notes for teachers, the BBC microcomputer system, the BBC telesoftware service, associated correspondence courses, and information about other courses, computer clubs, and other sources of local advice, please send a 12 inches by 9 inches addressed envelope with 16.5 pence postage to this address: Broadcasting Support Services, PO Box 7, London W3 6XJ, and could you please indicate clearly what information is required. If you want notes for teachers on the first 5 programmes, you must enclose an 80 pence postal order payable to Broadcasting Support Services with your stamped addressed envelope. Now on BBC2, Bob Thorkeld reports on how the micro can help to deal with the increasing amount of data in the classroom.
Future office workers will need to handle data and process information electronically. In Clwyd, a word processing package called Edward is being developed by Peter Weston.
Edward itself is stored, rather unusually, on a chip inside the computer. So all we have to do is simply to tell the computer to look for the Edward chip. Edward then provides us with a menu. We can select a number of options, and the one we'll select is Revise. This means that what we will do is to call a document into the microcomputer. Now that the disk is in the disk drive, we need to select from the menu, and we do this simply by selecting R. There's a slight change of colour to confirm what we've done, and now we have to indicate to Edward here the document name. The document that I've chosen to use is called QWERTY. At this point, Edward will look for the document on the disk and bring it inside the microcomputer. So now I have a copy of my document here inside the computer, and I'm going to work on that particular document. We can see a little flashing cursor here in the top left, and that's very important within word processing because it's that cursor that we can position within the text to tell Edward where the next operation is to be performed. We can perhaps come to this word because we notice that there is a spelling mistake. If you make a mistake, you can correct that mistake if you realise it almost as you're typing by asking the machine to delete and rub that out. If we now insert a small a in its place, the next operation is to move to there. We want to select that word and to delete it, and then to insert in its place the word valuable. It's very simple for pupils to use and always shows them on the screen exactly what is happening. For example, to change the shape of the document, we simply bring up a table. They can immediately see the shape of the document. We can change the left-hand margin and return, and immediately that left-hand margin has increased. In the same way, we can straighten the right-hand edge, which is a process known as justification. If we choose this particular paragraph, the pupil simply moves the cursor to the beginning, selects the object, which is a paragraph, and selects the operation, which is justify, and immediately the right-hand margin is straightened. And finally, the most obvious requirement for the pupil is to have a printed copy of what they've actually done. And on Edward, it couldn't be simpler. We just simply press the key, print. It's a multimedia pack that provides resource material for pupils in the form of a self-instructional booklet, for teachers in the form of wall charts, overhead projection slides, teaching guidelines. There are specimen documents on disc and on cassette for pupils to use, and there's a video cassette suitable for in-service training. In developing Edward, we put together a team that comprised a teacher of the secretarial skills with considerable experience, a computer educator who knew the technology and what it was capable of, and we worked from the classroom, from the pupils, out towards the machine. It's just about to go through its process of testing, which is going to mean that its release is going to be delayed because we've got to be certain that what we have produced is a product that is usable within the classroom. The strategy basically is to place the responsibility for the development in the hands of the teachers themselves. If a teacher is to accept an application of microcomputers, they would ideally like to have designed it and developed it themselves, and our strategy is based on providing them with the opportunities, the resources, the facilities to enable that to take place.
At Martin Sixth Form College in Cleveland, a different kind of information processing problem arose in handling the data involved in teaching nutrition. Cleve Diet is the name its authors Bob Waters and Jeanette Bowen have given to their programme.
79,1. 34,1.
Bob, can you tell me exactly what the Cleve Diet programme does?
Yes, it's designed to enable you to enter the details of a person or of a food and finally determine if that person has actually eaten adequate quantities. It's been designed so that it is as flexible as possible and we can use the different sections in it in any order so that it allows as wide a range of variation in examining diets as one could, I think, really wish for.
What have you got on the screen there now?
At the moment we've entered the information for a male with a certain height, weight, level of activity, and it has calculated, among other things, his ideal weight that he should really aim to be at. This is the sort of starting point in many ways. From here, we return always in the programme after each individual stage back to this command screen. From here, if we now look at that individual, we can see what he'd require in the way of nutrients to be actually eating a balanced meal in a day. The next step really is to then go back and start feeding in the details of one of the meals. If we take a quick look at a breakfast, the foods have to be entered as codes rather than as food names because of problems with memory size. So the first number denotes the food code. The second number that I'll enter in each case denotes the amount, the quantity you'd be eating. So it's and to finish the meal, there's a standard note. Now if we again ask it for a display of results, we'll this time get the same pattern before of what was required. We'll also now get what we have provided in those few foods we've given, and there's additionally a comment on the balance, the comparison of the two, although at the moment, of course, we've not really fed him sufficient.
We've got a lot of figures that say low, so he was low in terms of protein, fat, carbohydrate. What had he actually had there?
He'd actually had 1 apple and a slice of bacon.
How would you, in the normal way, not using a computer, handle this topic of diet in the syllabus?
Well, it would be a very long, slow, tedious part of the diet because you would have to use food tables. Not only do you have to read very detailed food tables, but you have to do a lot of maths, or not a lot of maths, but a lot of calculations with them. And that does tend to worry a lot of students because they think they're not very good at maths.
And that's not an essential part, then, of doing it, coping with the arithmetic?
No, the main thing is that you understand the basics behind nutrition. And it cuts out the tedious part of it and brings it to life immediately. You get an immediate reply, and therefore you take out that food so that you then increase your protein, decrease your fat, increase your carbohydrate or whatever. My interest started when they first got a computer at college and I knew that there was a diet programme for large computers. I then went to a course at Teesside Polytechnic that Bob was actually giving the talk on, and some of our other computer department staff were there. I was very interested. As a result of that meeting, there were about 6 or 8 home economics teachers decided to form a working group and work on this particular type of programme.
As Jeanette said, I was giving a talk at this course at the Polytechnic, and they approached me afterwards expressing interest in the diet programmes, but one that would fit into microcomputers that were available in schools. As I teach the the topic in my own subject as well, biology. I was naturally interested. I had some experience of programming and hence volunteered to act as programmer for the group. And we spent quite a long time then as a group with me explaining what computers could or couldn't do, and the home economics teachers saying what they would like the program eventually to do, so that we came down to the best match of possible and ideal in the end that we could attain.
Jeanette, this is an example of homegrown software. Do you see that as being the way forward in your school?
I think it has definite advantages in the fact that the teacher then controls exactly what they are going to use it for, and therefore it's teacher controlled, but not necessarily. There are other types of software which could be used, but I think the teacher would have to check very carefully that they did actually fulfill the purpose of their particular teaching.
Yes, I think actually it's very important in many respects in that the teacher is directly involved and can think of the educational aspects of what he's doing and guide the programme to assist him or her in those, rather than having to adapt the teaching to the programme style. There are problems, of course. It takes a lot of time and it can be quite demanding to work out just what your programme needs to do, but it is obviously being successful in many schools.
Even at a much simpler level, many school projects can benefit from the ability of the micro to handle data. Thurcroft Junior School near Rotherham has been experimenting with its use in 2 environmental projects.
I've got Larry.
These children are studying the road markings and signs in the area around the school. They've been out describing and drawing them as part of their project.
What's this sign here? Can you really tell me? Right, well, we'll talk about that when we get back in the classroom.
Back in the classroom, children have been finding out more about the meaning of the various road signs and feeding that information into the computer. Other members of the class can then begin drawing it out. The pressfax board's laid out with 100 different road signs and markings. When one of the squares is pressed, the micro responds by displaying its message on the screen.
A warning steep hill upwards. Never knew that, was it? Yes, never knew that. Information ring road. What's a ring road? That's right for me. To be obeyed, mandatory, no right turn. A warning, countdown markers approaching, conceal level crossing. Each bar represents a third of the distance from the first warning sign to the crossing.
The second environmental project at Thurcroft is a study of the Abbeydale industrial hamlet, a few miles from the centre of Sheffield. Abbeydale was a water-powered forge where scythe blades, razors and industrial tools were once made.
Right, here we have the water wheels.
One of the teachers using the micro to help sort out the facts about Abbeydale is Viv St John.
At Thurcroft, we believe very strongly that children should have first-hand experience. We don't like them to learn from second-hand experience. We like them to see things for themselves, do things for themselves and find out for themselves. So this is our basic philosophy. And we've come to Abbeydale not for any special reason, because it could have been any other place. We believe that children have to acquire certain skills, they have to adopt certain attitudes to work, and through this, it could be done through any media. So we decided to come to Abbeydale because our school's not been here before. It offered the geographical, the historical, the literature, the maths, etc., that we do need to bring into our curriculum. So this is the reason we're at Abbeydale particularly. Classes are all a 4th year class, 4th year junior class, aged 10 to 11, and we have 3 teachers working as a team. I'm very new to the computer. In the summer, I didn't know what it did or what it was capable of doing. So in fact, I'm learning along with the children.
That's good, isn't it?
It's forming a very big part of our information that we're collecting about Abbeydale. We believe very strongly that we're in an information society. In 10 years, microcomputers are going to be a part of people's lives, and we want our children to have the right approach to them. So we're using it in two ways. We're using it to collect the census material about the people who lived in Abbeydale, and we're using it with the press facts to look at the mapping of the area and to look at the process of the knife making that went on at Abbeydale.
Is that just a small group then in your class who'll get the benefit of working on the computer?
No, everyone will have a chance. With the database where we're feeding in the census material, every child has had a chance to have one of these census returns for the area. They've managed to type it into the computer, and then everyone will have a chance to withdraw certain areas of the material. What would you like to find out?
Steel manufacturer.
You'd like to find out who is a steel manufacturer on the census. Right, so that's going to be field 9, which is the occupation. So if you could press in 9. Right, come on, Tim. Steel manufacturer. Can you spell it? Right, let's see what it does for us.
That's only the only one.
It's given us no more records. Yes, let's try something else. Let's try and find out how many people...
Blade.
Pardon?
Razor blade grinder.
A razor blade grinder. OK, let's try it again then. Good. Press return, see if you can find somebody. There we go.
As with Thurcroft's road signs project, the press fax pad's used to help deal with pictures and facts.
The press fax is similar to a 100 number board. It's got 100 squares, 10 by 10, and they are electronic squares, so that you can press any one of those squares and feed information into the computer relevant to that square. Now, the children have been using it to make a pictorial representation of the knife-making process at Abbeydale. They had 100 squares to work with, and they realised that they had 7 processes. So depending on the size of the pictures they wished to do, they divided their 100 squares up into relevant sizes. So that meant that each time they wanted to feed information, they had between 6 and 10 squares. So it's quite laborious. They have to feed the information and then press each square.
And what have they actually done? There are pictures there. How does that
They've tried to say in as few words as possible what happens in that particular photograph. So if they've done a painting of the tilt forge, they need to say in as small and concise a way as possible what happens in the tilt forge. And this, I think, is one of the skills, the pricing skills that they're using with the computer. We have small plans which we've produced so that the children know they've got 240 letters or spaces which they can use. And it's amazing how difficult it is to make something short enough to fit into that sort of space.
How will that data bank, is what in effect it's going to be used with other classes?
The 2 other classes who have been to Abbeydale with us and have not been as involved with the computer are going to use it to withdraw information. We're hoping to use it with the other classes so that they can go along, look at one of the paintings, say, I wonder what this is, and find out exactly what it is. It's not a tremendously deep way of drawing out, but it's quite interesting, and I think the putting in is probably the most important part. I've been a pilot scheme for the computer in the school. I've made quite a lot of mistakes, and so have the children, so hopefully next term the other 2 teachers in my year will have a chance to use the computer, having learnt from my mistakes.
A lot of schoolwork centres around understanding and handling large quantities of facts. Computers can help by processing this data quickly. MicroQuery is the name of one data management programme. I asked Margaret Hathaway at Elaine's school how she's been using it.
Here we've got a database dealing with the census records of a local village. We're in Stevenage, Datchworth is a few miles away. And we have stuck very closely to what was on the census, but we've added 1 or 2 things that exploits the power of the technology. So a group, as you've seen, can look at local mobility. And it's a fairly straightforward question. They merely key in the question. The computer checks to see that they've asked it to do a reasonable thing, slot it up on the screen when it's perfectly happy, and we've selected a few items of information to be printed. Now all I have to do is ask it to go. The computer is now searching through, and you can see the number of records being checked and the number of matches. Children could not possibly achieve this working with the primary sources.
What exactly is it doing now? I'm not quite clear.
Here it's selecting people who were born in Hertfordshire, but not in Datchworth itself. So they're people who've moved into Datchworth from within the county. We have the census data up for Datchworth in 61, 71 and 81. So one group's been following a family through. It was an unusual name. They wondered what happened to families with lots of children who were agricultural labourers, and they followed them through from 41, in fact, every decade through to 81. Another group's looking at women as heads of household. Another group's looking at the state of the number of widowed people. Another group's looking at the elderly, another group looking at the young. All things we just couldn't do before.
Why not? Why couldn't you do them before?
Because they were having to read documents. It's obviously important that they look at the documents, but they couldn't actually handle them quickly enough and easily enough to get real history out of them. The technology does the sorting, the spade work for them, and lets them do the creative thinking and question posing. A lot of children do a lot of collecting of information, and usually it stops there. It's the actual structuring of information and organising it in such a way that you're going to be able to get the questions you want answered. That's the exciting bit. And then it's just a case of typing it in very simply. If you liken it to a form, you draw up the form first, then type in the information into the appropriate slots.
How easy is it to use a ready prepared database? In other words, how much training do you think an average teacher would need?
It'll take a while, depending on how much they know about computers, but once they know they can't do any harm, the thing won't blow up, and if they make a mistake, nothing will happen. It doesn't need to take very, very long at all. If there's somebody in the school who knows something about it, half an hour.
So again, you don't need programming skills, do you?
Oh, no. It's just like driving a car. I don't know how to service my car. I love the freedom I get from being able to go to A to B.
But why only one micro? In the same school, another room gives a glimpse of future possibilities. The arrangement here is called Open Terminal. I asked the headmaster of Alain's school, John Abbott, to explain just what it is and what it does.
A great deal of time and effort has gone into establishing Open Terminal because basically we feel that in this terminal we've got perhaps the beginning of an idea which is going to help technical education in schools. You see, when you think about the use of computers in a classroom, people tend to think of one computer at the top, 30 children scramming around, 4 of them interested, 26 of them lost and bored. And when staff started talking to me a couple of years ago about the desirability of having a second computer in the classroom, even that seemed to solve no problems. What I thought we needed, and I'm very much the layman here, was perhaps 15 computers in a classroom, 2 people to each machine, wiring the whole lot up together and getting a network out of it. Sounded fine. We did the sums and it was £45,000. There was no way in which we as a single school could even find a tenth of that. So we hit upon the idea, which I think is the clue to all this, of combining the interests of 3 schools and the community and saying to the 3 schools, right, between 9 and 4, you have got Open Terminal, not just for computer classes, but for familiarization classes, so that every child in the school at some stage or other will have the chance of hands-on to a machine, so that by the age of 14, they'll all understand the basics behind computing and not be frightened of it.
How about the community?
The community, of course, is an integral part of this in 2 ways. Every child going through this centre will be coming out for employment in 1, 2 or 3 years' time. And one of the attractions of this scheme to the local employers is that the 2,500 children of the 3 schools will have all had hands-on experience. The second level, of course, is evenings, weekends, community courses for a variety of interest groups. And in this level, there's a great deal that we can do for literally hundreds of people here in the locality who have been nervous about using computers in the past, haven't quite known what it's been all about, afraid to make mistakes in front of their own children, can come here and in the anonymity of Open Terminal, nobody looking at them, make their own mistakes as I'm doing, and then at long last begin to realise, of course, you can keep up with other people, you can understand what computing is about.
So if you've got to summarise then, what is Open Terminal?
Open Terminal is, I would suggest, a very exciting project in which all sections of the community have come together with education and say, OK, there's a problem, there's a technical problem, there's a financial problem, together we can solve it. And Open Terminal shows a way of solving a major problem.
That's right. Go and continue. Yeah.
Doesn't say how many though.
It will at the end, wouldn't it? 47.
Yeah, film the size.
A booklet.